going to talk a little now about meditation. So as I've mentioned, for the last week I've been teaching some guys in a very limited way, in a much smaller scope than the man who coined this phrase for his lectures. Everything I know concerning energy maintenance arts like Qigong and yoga. They didn't really have much history in meditation, although one of them does meditate regularly. He hasn't talked to me at all about what he does while he's meditating or what his style or technique is. And there are countless techniques. I started when I was 18. I was given a mantra through transcendental meditation, the Maharishi that the Beatles had a short stint with, famously, in the 70s. It's a very simple sound of one or two syllables that is called a seed sound that you repeat in your head and fill up all of your attention with the sound, with the idea that eventually it will grow into wisdom or compassion or any number of things depending on the seed you're given. So as some of you may have heard, there's like a prescription of 20 minutes twice a day, and I did it 20 minutes twice a day for a few years, and then sporadically. You're not supposed to tell this mantra to anybody, and I ended up telling a few people that I thought might benefit from it. And some of them had really amazing effects. One of my favorite phrases about people who say they don't have time to meditate 20 minutes twice a day. There's some old saying, oh, if you don't have time to meditate for 20 minutes twice a day, then you should obviously be meditating for an hour twice a day. A lot of people I've talked to about meditation, they say, I can't meditate. I have too much stuff going on in my head. And that's a perfectly fine response because everyone has too much stuff going on in their head. Everybody who lives in the world of meditating all the time knows that. And in the East, they have a phrase called monkey mind, that the mind is just constantly jumping around, subject to subject to subject to subject, past, future, planning. Everyone's mind is too active. That's not what meditation is about. But it's something to work with. There are lots of styles of meditation, and like I said, I had a mantra style of meditation for the first few years. I was meditating from the age of 18 till I think 21, and then I met a Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist, who gave me a mantra for a bodhisattva named Green Tara. Buddhists are famous for meditation, and the meditation for Green Tara was very interesting for me because instead of it just being a sound like I had been using the years previously, it was a phrase in another language that could roughly be translated as a sentence in our minds. But he said that the translation isn't important, it's the sound, the frequency. But he also gave me a whole relationship with this character. In Buddhism, they don't worship gods. In Tibetan Buddhism, they have these things called bodhisattvas, which the average person would think of as a god. They have idols, they have paintings of them. You can make offerings to them, like a lot of the Indian gods and guess, Christian gods and other gods in the world, except those who don't allow idolatry. And that's right, Christians. Even though Abrahamic religions don't like idolatry, like Judaism and Islam, Christianity has lots of idolatry. That is to say, statues of Jesus and Mary and lots of other saints and paintings. Those are idols. But I guess they're not false idols, so it's okay. But the Bodhisattvas, they have lots of idols. They're not considered gods because they have a different story. They're nearly immortal, but not really immortal. And their whole purpose is to help people not suffer. And Green Tar was introduced to me with this long story, and he said, when you're saying this mantra, you can picture her. She's a 16-year-old with beautiful pink soft palms and perky, soft, beautiful pink nipples, and the most gorgeous shade of green skin, almond eyes, full lips, but you do not love her because of these things. You love her because she is the embodiment of compassion. But the idea was that you could picture something and fully flesh it out, imagine it as a character, and get all these details about it. And there was a further meditation, which is something used a lot in Tantra, not what people call Tantra, but actual Tantra, where you look around. This is the teaching he gave me, is that every female you see can be an embodiment of Tara. So when you start to relate to her as a goddess of infinite compassion who wants nothing else but to rid the world of suffering, then every woman you look at, you can imagine, is an avatar for her. So that was at least a different type of meditation than just saying a sound with my eyes closed for 20 minutes twice a day, like having this kind of groundwork and fleshed out, so on and so forth. However, the mantra was still a magic word, like Asa Nisi Masa, say the magic word and we'll all be free. You get that 8.5 reference. And that was a good deal of what meditation meant to me, except for yoga, which I always viewed as a type of movement-based meditation. A lot of yoga nowadays is an exercise. It's an athletic sport. I was going to say without competition, but that's not entirely true, of course. A lot of people are competing with the other people in the class. Oh, she's much more flexible than me. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. My hips are so tight. It's not about that. And it is true that yoga can give you a sexy body. But we do not love yoga because of the sexy body that it can bestow upon you. We love yoga because it is a practice by which you can become one with the breath, through which you can become one with the universe, and through the asana, the physical practices, you can be aware physically of the binding in your body, the places you are trapped, be them emotional, mental, desire, or just physical tightness. And through dedication, concentration, and perseverance, you can release yourself from this bondage. If you look at yoga that way. Qigong, a lot of it looks like flowy movement stuff, which is really nice. Again, on a physical level, it is lubricating the joints, making the lymph flow, making the blood flow, releasing endorphins and all sorts of other good chemicals that are good for your immune system and your brain and your state of mind. And as a moving meditation, it relates to a whole host of things, but on a simple level, relating to all things in existence as being different frequencies of the same thing, which is eternity, which can be broken down into the idea of chi, or energy, which can be thought of as coagulating into thick things like material manifestations, or less thick things like the particles in the air, pollen, oxygen molecules, even less thick things like rays of light from stars, things like gravitational pulls, things like magnetic, things like sounds, all different variations of qi. But when you're practicing qigong, you set a posture, come into an idea that you are made of the same stuff as everything else, and you set your mind to that, which allows you to access everything as much as you can access your own self. So again, people who have a long practice of meditation involving feeling the body, if they set upon themselves to practice qigong, they can feel intricate layers of their body and the space outside of their body, which is where a lot of people's definition of self stops, unless their self involves a label like artist or CEO or whatever kind of ideologies they identify with, or possessions they identify with. But a lot of people would say that their self stops at their body. So when you relate with qigong, you can just as much feel yourself as you can feel the stars, the sky, the happiness, the sadness. You can palpably relate to these energies vibrating at different frequencies or in different dimensions, and of course far more than can be spoken about. But more of what I'm talking about in this talk is sitting meditation. And the sitting meditation that I find more fascinating at this point in my life is not one saying magic words or relating to idols. Nothing against them. And I actually do enjoy them every once in a while. But is exploring the present moment as close as you can get to it. And for any of those who once fancied yourself a beatnik, or wanted to fancy yourself a beatnik, even in my generation, we would read On the Road and fantasize about those characters. There was this idea of Neil Cassidy being closer to the actual moment of life happening than any other person that he had met. Sorry, Dean Moriarty. There's this idea that life is happening like a flicker rate, like a television. Some have said that there's 72 trillion moments in every second. So a very high flicker rate. And what they mean by that is there is you might say a black screen or a blank screen, an empty space of limitless potential that the universe is composed, or that the universe is. And everything we know of as reality arises into being, exists, and passes away 72 trillion times a second. So it's a very convincing show. And if you could imagine slowing your attention down enough to be able to perceive that, then you might be able to understand the mechanism of how it works and why the consciousness is so convinced that it's real. Getting into any of these practices involves a certain mindset. In Buddhism, it's called right view, which can be a little triggering, the idea of right and wrong. I never really liked the idea of right and wrong, but it's a translation. And it could be stated in such a way that you imagine what enlightenment is, and you practice being in that mindset. And in this case, it could be said, because anything you say is not true, but in this case it could be said that the truth is that all of us are made of the same thing. We all exist in this realm. We are, like it or not, all entirely interdependent on each other. None of you, or very few of you, can make your own food, or cut your own toenails, or change your own faucets. Certainly none of you can make the internet or the computer by yourself. Certainly none of you can give meaning to money by yourself. We are entirely swimming in the existence, creation, and ideas of all the other beings that are alive right now and that came before us. On a physical level, a societal level, a ideological level, an emotional level, which is something that, again, I believe you don't have to, but that everybody is kind of emanating their emotional reality around them in what could be called an aura, and you just interact with it all the time, usually without knowing it. There are some people that are very sensitive and can't help but be aware of it. And for those of us who aren't so sensitive to that realm of existence, like some people are better hearers than others, some people are better seers, have a better range of colors, or even just better eyesight. Some people have more acute emotional awareness and emotional intelligence. And of course this refers to relating to other people's emotional realities, and certainly as much as our own. Which gets into what I would recommend you could think the definition of meditation is about, at least for a while. And sitting yourself in somewhat of a comfortable position and deciding you're going to meditate, and setting a timer for any amount of time, and then just decide you're going to stick to it until that time is done, and use that time to try to feel what you're feeling in the present moment without any elaboration or any distraction. And as I was saying earlier, the mind, the attention is a monkey mind. It always likes to jump and jump and jump and jump and jump. So an important part of the practice is permitting failure and practicing kindness. So if every 3 seconds you lose track of the present moment and find yourself thinking about something, you should not hate yourself or be cruel to yourself. And you should not give up. You should say, oh, this is normal. This has nothing to do with my aptitude or my ability or my unique composition as a being. This is just what most people experience when they try to do this. Even people who've been meditating for a really long time, when they sit down, the mind just goes to. What you do get better at over time is responding to the mind. What we tend to call thinking is a very convincing mechanism of playing with the attention, like a cat plays with a dead mouse or a bird that it's caught in the trees. A lot of people value thinking greatly. They say, oh, they don't even teach us to think for ourselves. Nobody's even aware, nobody even knows how to think for themselves. As if it's like some great thing. And although it's great to be able to have an ability to be aware of what is bullshit and what is what resonates with your sense of truth, thinking is not necessarily the best tool to do that. Intuition is generally a lot better. Going with your gut, as a lot of people call it, is much better than going with your thought process. Because when you do start watching your thought process, what you'll notice about it is that it constantly is changing what it's doing. It just is constantly going forward and backwards and side to side. It will trigger off emotions, and then you will, thank you. It will trigger off emotions. Somebody just donated. The mind will trigger off emotions, and then you'll usually get spun out into another emotional reality than the one you started in, and completely forget about what you were thinking about anyway, and go on to thinking something else that somehow validates your emotional reality that existed for that moment. So when meditating, it's usually a good idea to not pay any attention to what your mind is actually thinking. However, it's very good to notice your mind is thinking, because if you notice your mind is thinking, you're usually less likely to get carried away with your mind. When you start looking at the landscape of the consciousness, you'll notice that the mind will tell a story, and usually the consciousness will just get on board. Like, metaphor that's often used is a train, and it'll be like the door will open and you'll be like, oh, there's this nice thought, and you get on it and you're like thinking about the past and how it connects to what you're going to do later, and then you're very upset or you're worried and you're anxious, and then you end up getting off the train and you're in a completely different landscape and you're distressed and you have no idea how you got there. And like, that's a really good thing to notice, and it's especially a good thing to notice before you get on the train. So when you're trying to meditate and you notice that the mind is starting to spin up a story, if you just say, oh, thinking, and you drop it. What I have been doing lately, when I notice the mind thinking, because you can't ever just ignore something that really wants your attention. It will get your attention. So it's always better to give the attention something better to do than pay attention to something that you know is going to distract you from the present moment. Which is why a lot of the meditation I've been doing in recent years, the focus of the attention, again, is not a magic word or an idol, but something as simple as the breathing or what the body feels like. And often when they say the breathing, the traditional way of paying attention to your breath is feeling the breath coming in and out of your nose right there at the threshold where it's coming in and out of your nose. It's a very subtle sensation, so you have to be subtle. And it's a very powerful experience, because without it you would die. It connects you to every other thing that's alive, because everything is sucking the air in and pushing the air out. So kind of you're like breathing everybody's inside into your body. Don't panic about what's going on right now. But distractions. It's a very nice thing I'm not going to comment about. Get on that thought train. Being able to pay attention to the breath, kind of understand the implications of it, that you can control it, but if you stop controlling it, it just keeps doing what it's supposed to do, whatever it wants to do. You can pay attention to it without manipulating it and learn a whole bunch of things about your body, like how deeply you're breathing, how shallowly you're breathing, a whole bunch of qualities of the breath that speak about your emotional state. You can use it as a point of interest to look deeper into what's happening now with the consciousness, with the vessel that the consciousness is in as far as you can perceive it, which is what we call the body through all the different senses. So even though it's traditionally often felt here, a lot of teachers nowadays talk about feeling it in the belly. It's less specific, it's less acute, which is good because on one level it's less likely to get you high. There's this thing that can happen, useful thing to know, a type of meditation called samadhi, that if you put all of your attention here and you ignore the rest of all of the sensory input, and you actually do achieve that type of concentration where any other stimulation that's happening internally or externally, you fold into this point or completely are unaware of by pulling in all of your other senses. You can have these things called jhanas, which is what the old Indians, like 2,000 or 3,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago, used to call what we call meditation now, janeti. This idea that you fold your attention into a point and you kind of fold into different layers of yourself or consciousness, which there's a telescoping inward range of consciousness called jhanas. And there are jhanic factors that come with each level, but the initial ones can lead to a type of joyous mania, like doing drugs. And when I first started jhana-ing, which I guess I did even in TM, it was very addictive to me. And when I didn't get the jhanas, I felt like I was failing, or that I was doing something wrong, or that it was just boring. It wasn't working, or it wasn't doing anything interesting, because I was very addicted to the idea of getting high or having fun, which a lot of us, are. And we can apply that even to meditation. So again, by putting the focus in your belly, which is less specific, you're less likely to jhana, you're less likely to get high. Past the high of the second or third jhana, there comes a tremendous peace, and that can be really, really wonderful. A happiness and a peace that is cool and calm. That's a very useful thing to know how to do. If you're someone who has a tendency for panic attacks, you can certainly dehabituate your psyche away from panic attacks by learning how to have peace dependent on nothing else besides watching your breath and not even doing anything to it. Also, it's been said that if you're in extreme pain, it's a good skill to have because you can always turn inward. But although that's an important skill to have, and I would encourage you all to sit and watch your breath and see how long, 20 minutes twice a day, 2 hours, 3 hours, if you can focus your attention on your breathing and let everything else drop away. Think of it as just a good skill to have. The thing that I'm more interested in right now is kind of honoring the present moment through actually experiencing it. So again, on the basest level for me, it's about feeling. And when my mind gets active and I start thinking and I notice the thinking, I have started turning the attention towards what does the thinking feel like? And because of some of the mind states I've had where I've been able to see thought forms, I have now a comfortable ability to feel the thought forms. Even though I don't see them clearly most of the time, I can feel them and palpably feel it. So turning the intellectual process into emotional or visceral experience. If that's not something available to the consciousness in your body, you can bring your attention to whatever feeling you feel in your body. That could be where your body is touching the floor, where your butt is sitting on the chair, where there's any pain in your body. There's almost always pain somewhere, so you can literally go towards the pain, asking questions like, what's happening? Just what's happening? Let it reveal itself to you. And if you notice any panic or fear about it, you can say, can I be okay with this pain or this sensation? And if you find you can't be okay with it, then you can say, well, can I be okay with this anxiety? Can I be okay with this fear? Can I explore what this fear actually feels like? Can I be okay? Can I explore with this anxiety? Like, oh God, what if my foot goes numb and then my foot never works again? Like, these are the things the mind does. And what if I'm breaking my back? What if I'm hurting my neck? I've heard people who meditate and think like, oh God, what if I'm gonna have a heart attack because I can feel my heart beating? Can you be okay with that fear of having a heart attack while you're meditating? Another practice about actually experiencing what's actually happening right now, which I really like and is sometimes called guarding the sense doors, is where you kind of rotate the awareness through all of the different 6 senses. So I know that when I was a child, we often talked about 5 senses: hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, seeing. The 6th sense would be thinking, or internal consciousness, awareness, like I'm sad, or I'm angry, or I'm bored, or I'm tired. These are concepts that you're aware of internally, not to mention all the like, oh, what I've got to do in an hour, or as soon as I'm done with this meditation, or I wish I hadn't have been like that when I was 7 years old. All of those kind of things, which can all just fall under the 6th sense of thinking, or feeling emotionally. And in the guarding the sense doors meditation, you don't necessarily give any attention or energy to the content of what the senses are being triggered by. You just notice that the attentions, that the senses are being triggered. So when you're meditating and you're practicing guarding the sense doors, I'll just do it right now verbally, feeling, hearing, feeling, seeing, breathing, hearing, feeling, happiness arising, thinking, hearing, looking, seeing, thinking, hearing, feeling, seeing. It's just something as simple as that. And it can be slower than that, or it can be faster than that. There's a type of jhana you can have through even this kind of awareness. Again, it's a level of consciousness. And so I've had moments where I'm guarding the sense doors and I just start getting faster and faster and faster and faster and faster until it's like lightning. And then I'm all of a sudden very high and in this giddy, bright place. Again, it's important to appreciate these moments of high that come naturally through meditation, but understand that that's not what meditation is about, and not to cling to it or try to make it happen. And there are worse things to do to try to make it happen. It's a fun, sure, I would say set upon trying to make it happen and see what that's like. It'll be frustrating because a lot of the times it doesn't happen. It's one of those things like chasing a Korak through the lost woods, or trying to get a wild animal to come and eat from your hand. That if you, more of you may have had an experience with that if you try too hard, a little dove just landed next to me. If you try too hard to get something to love you, it'll push it away. A little wild animal, trust me, come eat out of my hand. So if you try too hard, specifically going towards a point to like get this jhana, to get this high from concentration, either rapid concentration or fixed concentration, it will usually elude you. But if you relax into the concentration without grasping at it, it's a conundrum to try to achieve something without trying. But that's more likely when I've had success, when I was trying, which I haven't been lately. But I do really like the experience of like hearing. This is a really wonderful experience if you, for me, I have a bit of a science background, even though I am a crazy mystic, hippie preacher. I was very interested in science when I was younger, so probably a lot of you have heard maybe that you can hear sound because the sound waves are actually pushing particles that push the air and the particles and hit your eardrum, which causes a vibration which lets you hear the sound. It's one of the ways of describing the mechanism of how sound works and how hearing works. So if you can imagine that even though your eardrum hears more acutely and better than any other part of your body has a whole bunch of acoustic shapes on it. Like the ocular cavity of the eye, maybe even the divot of the chest. But even apart from the acoustic shapes in the body, maybe the nostrils, these large planes of skin, which can be very sensitive, can also perceive very subtle sensations. And if you're very subtle, when I've been very subtle, I've been able to feel, or as some would say, imagine I could feel, sound waves pushing particles against neuron receptor areas in my body. And these kind of things are, at least for me, very joyous. I've had a very different relationship with hearing since I thought of turning hearing from just a oral experience into a visceral felt sense. It's a word they use a lot, felt sense. So you can smell something and have the reaction of smelling something and the idea of smelling something, but you can also just have the full experience of smelling something. I see people sign on that I know have a very high sexual perception of life, and like even that is something that meditation can enrich. The sensual pleasures. For one thing, if you learn, a big part of meditation is to not get caught in desire. Often when you're meditating, if you set a timer for 10 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour or 4 hours, you'll want to get up and pee, you'll want to get up and drink water, you'll want to listen to music, you'll want to eat food, you may want some sexual thing, whatever your sensual fixation is. And it's a very interesting practice to be like, oh, I'm noticing that I want that, but I don't need to act on that desire. Very often the desire wins, or the desire drives you crazy, and when you're not meditating, when you don't have mindfulness, desires just kind of drive you around all the time. I want more of this, I want to get away from this because I don't like this is making me unhappy, so I'm getting away from that and I'm getting towards this because it'll make me happy or make me satisfied. That's generally what desires are doing all the time. So, though desire is not necessarily a fun thing to be caught in when you actually experience the mechanism acutely and repetitively, sensual pleasures can still be very pleasurable experiences. And the more dimensions of a sensual pleasure you can appreciate in the actual moment that it's happening, amplifies the sensual pleasure. It's one of the reasons people like drugs. I read some article today where somebody described that marijuana was just an herb that increased sensual appreciation. For some people, that's what it does. But being able to slow the self down and appreciate what's happening in the moment, without needing it to fix something or do something or achieve something or please something. It doesn't need to do anything. That's one of the great benefits or gifts of meditation, is that You don't do it to become a better person. You don't do it to fix your psyche. You don't do it to end your depression or end your mania. What you resist persists. And again, as I was saying earlier, if you're trying to meditate to get high, which is an option, it tends to be frustrating. However, if you meditate in a relaxed way with the clear perception that you're not trying to achieve anything, you're just practicing being at peace, practicing being in the present, practicing being enlightened, practicing being a compassionate, loving, kind person. There's a whole bunch of things you can put yourself in the mindset when you sit down to meditate, to practice. Then you can allow all of these other experiences to just blossom around you, which again is what we do often in life. We move through life with certain desires or certain goals, and then a whole bunch of other things happen. And some of them are pleasant, and some of them are unpleasant, as they like to say. So meditation's like that as well. Even when you're sitting somewhere doing nothing, except trying to watch your breath and trying to stay in the moment, a whole bunch of shit is happening. And the attention will move around and move around and move around. And when you get more acutely aware of the process, the mechanisms, the experience, it can be quite an amazing experience. But apart from that, I guess the reason I'm doing this talk right now is a lot of people, I've seen a lot of references lately from spiritual-ish people, spirituality folk, who are really riffing off the whole diatribe of stay inside, stay inside, stay inside, stay inside. We've all been sent to our rooms so we can think about what we've done. By Mother Earth, whatever. By the government. It doesn't matter. The entire world has gone into almost isolation. Some people are living with families or partners. But even then, we have a habit to entertain ourselves. And again, the entertaining, I'm not going to say it's bad, but like if your entire life is just constantly entertaining yourself, jerking off to porn, watching some thriller, watching some romance, watching the news, getting angry, watching talk shows, laughing and being angry and righteous and indignant, like these are highs and they're entertaining. But there's a whole bunch of other experiences you can have that are actually, I don't want to value, I was going to say they're actually more important or more pleasant. But, we all have different flavors we enjoy. But just understanding that it's a realm you can explore that's accessible to you and especially good for the situation you're in right now, which is being made to be still. We're in the metal rat year. Rat is the most water of the Taoist animals, the Chinese zodiac. And what water most likes to do is be afraid, panicked, anxiety, phobia on the negative spectrum. And on the positive spectrum, what water most likes to do is be silent, still, peaceful, and wise. So in this watery time, because metal actually nourishes water, so this metal rat is very strong water energy. I'll explain that some other day. It's a really good opportunity to be with stillness and silence, which is one of the versions of meditation. Of course, meditation can be active, yoga, qigong, it can be chanting, it can be singing, it can be dancing, trance states. A lot of people will say sports is my meditation, jogging is my meditation, sewing is my meditation, playing music is my meditation. These are experiences of being in the present, of being 100% one with the experience that's actually happening. So in that sense, they are very like meditation, or they are a meditation. And I would say in a lot of those experiences, you're learning things along the way. Whenever you're 100% present with what's happening, you're learning things. But perhaps a lot of people don't get to have those kind of 100% present experiences, especially not when they're addicted to entertainment. And it's a very different experience to make music than to listen to music. And even if you are somebody who likes sewing or painting or making music or drawing, I think it's still a very worthwhile thing to meditate in a silent, sitting, still way to learn about what you feel, how your feelings work, what triggers your feelings. Perhaps practice being at peace when you're triggered by yourself, by nothing else but what's going on inside of your head. That's a very useful thing to understand, that you can get really angry or really scared or really confused when there is nothing happening except what's happening inside of your head. On these meditation retreats, there's a term they have called hindrance storms. There are these regular 5 hindrances that they say block the ability, or hinder. They don't block. They make it harder to stay in the present moment. And sometimes all of them hit you at once, and they call that a hindrance storm. And it's been fascinating to me. Almost every meditation retreat I've gone on, I've had these hindrance storms, and sometimes, very often, multiple times throughout a retreat or a day on a retreat, where there's nothing happening except sitting to meditate, going back to the room, walking, eating, sitting to meditate. No, there's nothing happening. They create this environment where nothing happens. Maybe there's one time a day where they're giving some Dharma talk, some teaching. But it's usually not even that that's so triggering. It's usually just like you see somebody and they upset you. You don't know anything about them. Very often just stuff internally in your mind can drive you fucking crazy. And it's so useful to understand that that can happen. And how often does that happen throughout the everyday, ordinary mind? That you just get really upset about something and then throw it in every direction, and even apart from that, just noticing what the mind does, what the heart does, what feelings do, learning how they work, and practicing not having a bad time with them, not suffering. There's a metaphor they used in ancient times that when you get shot by an arrow, the pain of the arrow hurts. But then it also hurts when you're like, oh no, I've been shot by an arrow. Oh, what am I going to do? Is this going to kill me? It hurts so much. They say that's the second arrow. Thank you. Anybody else just donated some money? Appreciate that. And that very often the experiences that happen to us, if they're good or bad, it doesn't matter. We tend to make them a lot worse by freaking out, by overreacting, or even just reacting in any way that isn't peaceful, or clear seeing or positive. There's a term we use a lot in New York where we call people neurotic. And I defined neurosis once, was spending a lot of time with people that were neurotic, as people whose minds tend to make problems out of everything they see, as opposed to people who try to make solutions for problems. I think I think I know a lot of neurotic people, and we all are a bit neurotic or have those habits. But perhaps because I've been around a lot of neurotic people, I have an exacerbated sense of what's the solution. And as I've aged, I generally don't try to offer solutions unless somebody asks me for them. But if somebody panics at me, I'll usually be like, oh, well, what's wrong? And then I try to come up with some way to fix it. And I can't always come up with a solution, but it's really nice to notice neurotic habits and learn how to short circuit them. So one of the teachings I gave to the boys here that I'm teaching Qigong to was you set a timer for however much you feel like you want to commit to, and you can change that every time you sit. You try to make yourself comfortable, but you don't worry. Thank you. Another friend just donated money. I guess all it takes is asking. I'm sorry if I was guilting anyone into donating. I was like, nobody's donated anything for like a week. Thank you for donating, guys. I've had 3 donations while I've been doing this. You find a way to sit that's comfortable. But don't worry about being comfortable, because you're never going to be comfortable the whole time. The body always wants to move. The body always wants something else. You're always going to find some way of being uncomfortable. Your foot's going to fall asleep. You're going to have a pain in the back. This is a normal part of being in a body. And again, instead of making it a problem, just make it an object of curiosity, an object of interest. Oh, what is that sensation like? This unpleasantness. Can I be okay with that? So find a way you can sit that's mostly comfortable. Set a timer. I recommended either doing guarding the sense doors and constantly noticing, hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, feeling, or thinking internal processes without paying attention to the content as much as possible, and just keeping the attention on what's being triggered centrally, or just anchoring. And anchoring, I was talking earlier about giving your consciousness something better to do than get carried away by thoughts. And that's sometimes called anchoring. So you use your breath as an anchor. Your breath is an anchor. Or you can use one sense as an anchor, like hearing. Usually it's harder to make external sounds all about you and selfing. So it's easier to kind of stay in the present, although you can get neurotic about sounds you hear, but you can just sit and just notice what you're hearing. A lot of people like that as an anchor. And whenever the attention gets taken somewhere else, in a thinking process or pain or something, you can return to the thinking. You can return to the hearing. Another good one is feeling. So watching the breath is actually a feeling. It's a sensual, a felt sense experience, either watching it down here. But you can rotate between watching the breath, watching the ears, and just feeling where the body's sitting, what that's feeling like. Another very commonly practiced meditation technique in this realm is scanning through the body, just piece by piece, part by part, going from the top of the head down, however your imagination wants to organize that, to go through parts of the face, or just scan like a laser beam down, go through parts of the body, just feeling what it feels like, and moving on. Again, not necessarily telling a story about it, but just being like, oh, feeling. You can just move. Somebody described it once as a flashlight, that you're shining a flashlight into different parts of your body and just feeling, or you're like sweeping with a broom. That's an old Buddhist thing. Sweeping through all the body, just feeling what you're feeling. It's so great. I do so much Qigong that just doing this, I feel the particles or the energy moving in my arm. My hands are wands. But then I also said to the boys, you can ask yourself questions, which are very useful to steer the mind. What's happening right now? Just when you notice your mind's going off somewhere, or you're getting caught up in a pain or something, you can just be like, what's happening right now? What's happening right now? You can say, can I be okay with that? Another good question is, can I be happy? There's a really great idea of unconditional happiness, a happiness that's not dependent on anything. So if you're looking for something to do, sometimes the mind is looking for something to do. You're like, okay, I can watch my breath. I'm not getting high. Nothing's happening. I'm just watching my breath. This is so boring. Can I be happy? Can I know the quality of happiness? Can I watch happiness arise? Maybe you can learn what happiness feels like. As it spreads, where does it come from? Where does, you can explore these kind of sensations that are positive. Very often the mind turns more to things that are negative because there's lots of reason that people think consciousness is habituated like that evolutionarily. But it's really nice sometimes to focus on things that are more pleasant or positive, like peace. Can I be at peace? Can I be happy? And make the meditation about something positive like that. Can I set a timer for 27 minutes or 36 minutes and just be happy for no reason? And what are the things getting in the way of that? And how can I extrapolate that and apply that to my everyday life? Because of course that's what meditation is it's about. Like the things you learn in the silence and stillness are something that can be applied to every moment of your life. When you practice regularly, you build up what some refer to as mindfulness, which is habituating the mind to pay attention to what's going on internally and all the little mechanisms of it. And as I was talking about the flicker rate earlier, the 72,000 moments of existence happening every second, you can pay attention to more of those. You can notice as things are flickering. When your mind is all of a sudden becoming agitated, or when you're all of a sudden afraid, you can be more articulate in the present with the experience happening internally and externally. And again, you might just value this as a useful skill to have, because the more aware you are, the more choices you can make. And although a lot of teachers in Buddhist meditation schools, I was just watching doves mating or fighting. A lot of teachers in the Buddhist meditation styles will say one of the best things you can do with almost any question or any sensation is just let it go. To a certain degree, you can't do anything about it, you can't control it, it has nothing to do with you. It's not about you, just let it go. Practice abandoning. And that's a nice thing you can do with desire as well. Practice abandoning. So when you notice, you're like, I want a cookie, I want to have sex, I want to go outside and walk, I want to go to the disco and dance, whatever kind of experiences you're going to be desiring in this time of isolation and forced celibacy and forced stillness. Practicing abandoning desire gives you a whole new realm of freedom. You don't have to sit around being frustrated. You don't have to sit around being bored. You don't have to sit around waiting for things to get back to normal. And you don't have to sit around creating nightmare futures, because you can abandon those impulses and watch your breath and practice being at peace and practice being happy, which I guess is really the crux of this talk. That specifically in this environment that we're in right now, it's a landmine of misery, landmine field of misery, which life generally is, but society has changed in such a way where it's so easy to get what we want, where we can just order things from Amazon, or order the food to come, or order the men to come, or just get new shoes every day and new clothes every day. We can constantly fulfill the desire of novelty, the desire of things and experiences. And right now we can't, at least not to the degree that we've been accustomed to for the last decade or so. Especially in America, where everyone's wealthy enough, or at least willing enough to get in debt to do so. it's a precious opportunity to be aware of the desire mechanism, the mind mechanism, the emotion mechanism, and learn how to let it go, learn how to abandon it, and learn how to practice unconditional. Again, when we say unconditional, we mean happiness or peace or love or trust or sensation of faith, meaning like everything's going to be okay. I trust everything actually is okay and everything will be okay, and the whole workings of the universe, everything is fine. This is not a big deal. Oh, but it's a huge deal. It's not a big deal. Practice that. See the worth in it. I'm okay. I have enough. It's more than I need. I'm fine. Practice these kind of enveloping emotional states. Like, learn how to cultivate the emotional state you actually want to be in, as opposed to needing a cookie to get it, or needing anything externally to get it. Because it's something you can do. It's something that this elaborate vehicle you're in has the ability to do. You can conjure all sorts of experiences simply because you have the idea of it. You're all wizards. I'm a wizard. We're all wizards. We can imagine what happiness might feel like and just see if we can bring it up in the consciousness. Some people's imaginations are much more rich than others. Some people are much more visual or much more smell-based. So if you think of like a recipe that, there's people who love recipe book porn, right? That you could sit there and think of a recipe and you dream about a recipe of making a batch of cookies. You could similarly do that for an emotional state and just see what that's like. And again, this isn't the goal of meditation, but it's one of the things that can be practiced when you value sitting still and give yourself the time to explore that realm of being that is not dependent on external conditions. Unconditional happiness, unconditional peace. And eventually you can do it when you're laying down to go to sleep at night and when you're in the bed before you open your eyes, when you're waking up. Eventually you can do it when you're washing the dishes, and you can do it while you're on the train going to work, and you can do it when you're going for a walk in the park. You can watch, you can listen, you can learn, and you can practice. I think that's what I mean by meditation at this point, and why I find that this kind of keying into the emotional reality and the sensual reality and the function of the consciousness mechanism is far more fruitful, useful than magic words or asking idols for help. And I love me some magic words. Om Rapachana Tipi 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 Tipi. Om Mane Padme Hum. I love magic words, but I really don't. I see them more as tools and not paths. Very different. And I think that's enough for now. I would love to go jump in the sea, but it's cleaning itself right now, so it's really gross and frothy and filled with disgustingness. So maybe I'll go eat some food and be with some people. It's a beautiful evening. Thank you for any of you who have watched at any point in this talk, and watch later when you do. Thank you for anybody who feels moved to donate any amount of money to me. Appreciate it. Because, as I've said in some of the other videos, that my main source of income for the last almost 20 years, 17 years, has been giving massage. And in this current environment, that is an act of violence and irresponsibility and danger to give massage to people. Until we sort out this pandemic situation, so I can't make any money. And I'm hoping that these kind of things can be valuable, useful to people, and entertaining. And there's a whole practice in Buddhism that I really liked. The Buddhist places I've gone for meditation retreats, some of them don't require you to pay anything. The entire thing is donation-based. And some of them give you an option of how much you want to pay. You still have to pay something. They're like, you know, we got to pay for our food, we got to keep the lights on, blah, 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 blah. They demand you pay something, but then they also tell you that, you know, you can pay less if you make less. But we don't pay the teachers, or this price does not include paying the teachers, because there's an old practice in Buddhism that the teachings are always free, and it comes from a culture where generosity is seen as a gift. The option of being generous is seen as a gift. It alleviates the claustrophobia of self, and it gives you the opportunity to do something good for no reason, which is a specific type of joy that is only available in that situation. So giving to beggars, giving to teachers, just generosity. It's a practice of generosity. So they have a word for it, dana. But you know, they always give this talk like a NPR fund drive thing, and just say that it's an important practice. The teachers are doing this for free. This is their main source of income, so give generously and be aware of how you give, and don't feel like you're being guilted into it or you're having your arm twisted. But that you are connecting with the joy you experience from these teachings or these experiences that I'm sharing in this context. I'm somebody who's been putting content on the internet for over 20 years, and I've never tried to make money off of it until recent years, because I've given up living in New York City, and I've been putting myself in situations where I cannot make money from massage, like being in Thailand or Mexico, where the average massage costs like $10 or $20. And what I'm accustomed to in America is far greater than that, which has allowed me to indulge when I give a massage to somebody and put all of my energy into it. And so at this point, having been doing that for 20 years, putting a half-assed amount of energy into a massage I feel like is totally pointless. I don't want to do a massage where I'm not really putting myself into it, because that's very satisfying to me, but I also know it's an amazing experience for people. I've heard and I've seen and I've felt so often how people appreciate my massage work. It's such an ego stroke for me. And when I've stopped doing it, then when I start doing it again, I'm like, oh my God, I forget how much this nourishes me emotionally, not to mention financially. But even that being said, I'm still definitely in the poverty bracket of most Americans with the actual amount of money I make. Which is fine, because I live an amazing life where I have far more freedom than most people. So, you know, understand that you can have a lot of freedom without making a lot of money. You just have to make different life choices. But for people who are making money and appreciate whatever it is I'm trying to share, I would appreciate you giving anything. Again, any amount is helpful, because it's more than what I'm making right now. And as I've said in many of my writings in these videos, if there's anything you're interested in me talking about or demonstrating or showing, just ask me and I will. I'm gonna go walk around in the twilight. Much love, thank you.